My dear children, today's topic is branches of psychology or various fields of psychology. And now, various fields or branches of psychology, the cognitive psychology, biological psychology, developmental psychology, social psychology, cross cultural and cultural psychology, environmental psychology, health psychology, clinical and counseling psychology, industrial and organizational psychology, educational and school psychology, sports psychology, military psychology, space psychology, etc. Now, I am explaining cognitive psychology, biological, developmental, social, cross-cultural and environmental psychology. Now, cognitive psychology. Children, what is cognition? You know already. Cognition is the process of knowing. How we know, how we process information. And it involves thinking, perceiving, problem solving, decision making, memorizing, etc. Now, so what is cognitive psychology? And in picture, just you see, various topics under cognitive psychology. And now, cognitive psychology is the study of how people perceive, learn, remember and think about information, and investigates mental processes involved in acquisition, storage, manipulation and transformation of information received from the environment along with its use and communication. And major cognitive processes: attention, perception, memory, reasoning, problem solving, decision making, language, etc. And a cognitive psychologist might study, how people perceive various shapes, why they remember some facts, what are the reason behind forgetting, how they learn language, etc. And cognitive psychologists often collaborate with neuroscientists and computer scientists. And nervous system is the basis for our ability to perceive, adapt to and interact with the world around us. And cognitive neuroscience, is the field of study linking the brain and other aspects of the nervous system. Yes, and especially brain and nervous system, is important for our cognitive activities. Now, next, biological psychology. And biological psychology, and it's important branch, one of the important branch of psychology. And already the importance of physiological system. Yes, and physiology is one of the roots, one of the important subject of psychology. Why? And biological psychology, focuses on the relationship between behavior and the physical system. And the reason behind our learning, our storage capacity, our attention, our perception, our comprehension, any kinds of activities, our brain and our nervous system, important. Yes. And genetics, various glands. And biological psychologists often collaborate with, neuroscientists, geologists, anthropologists. And neuropsychology. Neuropsychology has emerged as a field of research where psychologists and neuroscientists are working together. Yes. And cognitive neuroscience is another important part of psychology nowadays. And researchers are studying the role of neurotransmitter or chemical substances which are responsible for neural communication in different areas of the brain and different types of neurotransmitter. Yes, GABA, acetylcholine, etc. And what are the roles of neurotransmitter in our activities, in our behavior? And one of the cause of psychological disorder, the imbalances of neurotransmitter. Yes. And they do their research on people with normal functioning brain as well as on people with damaged brain. You already know various brain imaging techniques, EEG, PET, fMRI, and you already know the full form of EEG, PET and fMRI. Yes. So now, developmental psychology is another important and interesting branch of psychology. Yes. And chapter 4. And you read, developmental psychology. What is development and the difference between growth and development. And developmental psychology studies the physical, social, and psychological changes that occur at different ages and stages over a lifespan, from conception to old age. Yes. What are the different types of development? And primary concern of developmental psychologist is how we become what we are. Yes, and developmental psychologists, realize that an accurate picture of the developmental pattern is the fundamental to an understanding of child. Yes, and they also recognize that knowledge of what causes variation in development is essential to an understanding of each individual child. And different development, and prenatal development, cognitive development, social development, emotional development, moral development, different developmental pattern. And conception to birth in this period we call prenatal development is important part of our life. Yes, and what are the different stages of our life? Infancy, toddlerhood, childhood, and childhood also early child, mid-child, latter childhood, and then puberty, adolescence, adulthood, old age. Yes, and what are the factors of development? And obviously, for our development, our biological aspect and our environment are important. Yes. And cognitive development, how our cognition is developed. And Piaget gave the theory of cognitive development. Yes. 4 stages of cognitive development according to Jean Piaget. Sensory motor stage, pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage, and formal operational stage. How we develop our morality, how we develop our personality, all are part of, developmental psychology. And what are the importance of gang age in our life? What are the importance of emotional development? What is attachment? And these are the main part of developmental psychology. Now next, social psychology is another important, the branch of psychology. And social psychology is today more useful than ever before. The main concern of social psychology is social behavior. Yes. And what is social psychology? Social psychology, and explores how people are affected by their social environments, how people think about the influence others. And we spend much of our lives in the presence of other people. Yes. With whom we interact in a variety of ways and in different settings. The primary focus of social psychology is on understanding how individuals are affected by other people. Yes. And various subject matter of social psychology, attitudes, obedience, conformity, interpersonal attraction, pro-social behavior, aggression, conflicts, prejudice, stereotype, discrimination, attributions, etc., are subject matter of social psychology. Yes, class 12. And you will know about what is social psychology. And prejudice. And prejudice can prove to be one of the most destructive aspects of human social behavior. Yes. And various forms of prejudice. Prejudice is not limited to ethnic and racial groups. Yes. So what is prejudice? What is stereotype? And how can we resolve prejudice? And nowadays the gender stereotypes, are important. And gender stereotypes are defined as the stereotypes, as a negative, illogical thinking, the stereotypes means, or beliefs. Yes. Concerning the traits, possessed by males and females. And they distinguish male and female from each other. Yes. And now, prejudice. Prejudice, our affective part. And prejudice is affective, referring to positive and negative feelings towards the target group. And we develop prejudice from stereotype. And develop discrimination from prejudice. So, stereotype, then prejudice, then discrimination. And discrimination is our behavioral part. Yes. And next, cross-cultural and cultural psychology. So what is culture? First of all, you have to know. Culture refers to many characteristics of a group of people. And including, our behaviors, our rules, our regulation, attitudes, values, customs that are transmitted from one generation to the next. Yes. And cultures, throughout the world share many similarities but are marked by considerable differences also. Yes. And now you know what is cross-cultural and cultural psychology. And culture is an important factor for our development, for our personality, for our behavior. Yes. And some culture and we call individualistic culture. That means especially Western culture. The importance of personal autonomy. Yes, but the Asian culture and Indian culture, we call collectivist culture. And give, higher value on collectivism and cooperation among members of the group. Yes. And cross-cultural and cultural psychology examines, the role of culture in understanding behavior, thought, emotion. How culture plays important role in our behavior. Yes. And the goal of cross-cultural psychologist is to look at both universal behaviors and unique behaviors, to identify the ways in which culture impacts our behavior, our life, our experiences, social experiences, etc. And now next, environmental psychology. And already the application of psychology. That means just to see what are the different branches of psychology. And environmental psychology, what are the importance of environmental psychologist. And environmental psychology is all about the interplay between people and their environment. Environment is an important part of our life. How we protect our environment. How environment influences our life. Yes. And environmental psychology studies the interaction of physical factors such as temperature, humidity, pollution, any kinds of natural disaster on human behavior. Class 12 again. And you will read, psychology and life. And this chapter is based on environmental psychology. Yes, how we protect environment. And what is pro-environmental behavior. And what are the importance of natural environment. What is built environment? Built environment, bridge, shopping mall, various complex, etc. And current topics of research in this field are, extent to which conservation of energy, efficient use of community resources are associated with and are functions of human behavior. Thank you, my dear children.